So this presentation is going to teach you about the elements and principles of art. The elements are like the ingredients or the building blocks of what art is made up of, and principles are how we use those ingredients or building blocks. As we go through the presentation, please write the definitions that you'll find in the yellow boxes. I'll pause for a few minutes on each slide so you can get those words written down. The elements of art are line, shape, form, color, value, texture, and space. So the elements are what we see when we look at art, what art is made up of. Line is a mark that goes between 2 points, and how you describe that line is what you would say when you're looking at a piece of art. Do you see long lines or short lines? Are they fat? Are they flowing? Are they jagged? How you would describe it would describe the type of line you see in a piece of artwork. In this print, the lines could be described as curvy or delicate or soft or flowing. In this painting, they seem more bold and choppy or jagged. The next element is shape, which is a closed two-dimensional object. There are 2 types of shapes that you need to know. The first type of shape is geometric. These shapes have a name, they're found in math, and we can measure their sides and angles. So shapes like triangles or squares or circles. You should be familiar with all of these. Here's a few examples of geometric shapes in art. This one by Mondrian, called Broadway Boogie Woogie, you can see is made up of lots of squares and rectangles. In this painting by Kandinsky, you can see there's lots of geometric shapes. We have triangles, we have circles, we have rectangles and squares, and we could measure most of these shapes. The other type of shape you need to know are organic shapes. These shapes don't really have a name, they're more random, and they're often found in nature. So when you just draw some random blobby shape on your paper, you're making an organic shape. You could also say that a leaf or a vegetable is an organic shape because you can't really measure too much about it precisely. Here's a couple of examples of artwork that uses mostly organic shapes. This one by Matisse has lots of kind of random organic looking shapes, some leaf-like shapes, a few geometric shapes in the bottom and in the background, but it's mostly made up of organic shapes. So if we look at this page, you should be able to tell the difference between geometric and organic. This would be a geometric shape. Geometric, 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 organic, organic. The next element of art is form. Form is a 3-dimensional object. It has length, width, and depth. You can see at the drawing on the left that this is a drawing of objects to make them look like they have 3 dimensions. The object on the right is a definition of a real box that you could have in real space. Again, there are 2 types of forms. We have geometric forms, which is just the same as shapes. They have a name, they're found in math, and we can measure the sides and angles. But now they have the 3rd dimension of depth. So we have spheres, cones, cubes, pyramids, those types of things. The difference is that a circle is a shape and a sphere is a form. It has a third dimension now. We also have organic forms. So again, they don't really have a name, they're more random, and sometimes they're found in nature. So you can see by this drawing that they are still look to be in 3 dimensions, but you can't really describe them or measure them. So here's some forms in art. These are sculptures, so they are in the round and they do have 3 dimensions. You can see the geometric form on the left has some edges that we could measure and angles we can measure, and the organic form on the right is more free-flowing, found in nature. The next element of art is color. Color is how light is reflected off an object. So when you look at a red apple, you're actually seeing the light that's hitting the apple and is reflected back to your eye as red. This is the color wheel. You'll learn more about this later, or maybe you already have. Color can make you feel a certain way. So when you look at a painting or a piece of artwork, it can make you feel a certain way or evoke some sort of emotion. If you look at the painting on the left of The Old Guitarist by Picasso, it might give you a different feeling of the painting on the right that has bright, bold, and beautiful colors. The next element of art is value, the lightness or darkness of a color. Value allows you to create things that look more realistic and can look in 3 dimensions even when you're drawing on a flat piece of paper. A gradient scale, a value scale, or a grayscale, all those terms are usually used interchangeably. They basically mean the light to dark of a color. This is what can make our drawings look more realistic and let us shade our shapes to turn them into forms. Like the example on the right where we see the sphere has been made to look like it has 3 dimensions by simply using a different value for different areas. This print has pretty much light and dark values, but they've used different techniques like hatching and cross-hatching to create some middle values. So we have really bright values in the white, very dark values in the black, but in the nose and under the eyes, you can see that it only almost creates a gray value because of the technique used of hatching. This drawing has lots of values and more smooth gradations throughout. It smoothly goes from white to light gray to middle gray to dark gray, but it creates a sense of 3 dimensions on a flat piece of paper. The next element of art is space. This is how artists shows depth. So we're not talking about space as an outer space, but making something look like it is real or in real space to us. The illustration on the right shows 6 different ways that you can create a sense of space. You can overlap things, you can shade them as we just talked about, you can place things closer to the bottom of the paper and up in the farther top of the paper to make them look farther away from us. Their size would be bigger if it's closer to us and smaller if it's farther away. You can make things lose focus that look farther into the distance, and you can use perspective. In this painting, there's lots of ways to illustrate a sense of space. You have large detail figures up at the front, bottom, and they're big. They take up almost about half of the painting. In the middle ground, you have figures that are smaller, they're less detailed. They look like they're a little bit farther away. In the very background, you have even smaller figures that are out of focus. You have mountains that are blurred out. And this artist also uses perspective by looking at those lines that lead you from the people in the front all the way back to the buildings in the back. Your eye is forced to move throughout the painting, and it looks like a sense of real space, even though it's a flat, two-dimensional painting. The next element is texture, how an object looks or feels. This teacup is made out of fur, so you could physically touch this teacup and it has a certain texture. That being said, there are two types of texture you need to know. Actual texture is what an object actually feels like. Textures like soft, hard, sticky, smooth, rough, bumpy, furry, these all describe different types of textures. Here's some examples of actual texture. If I touched this piece of pottery, my hand would go around the bumps and it would feel bumpy or jagged. Sometimes paintings become almost three-dimensional because of a surface texture that is created with the materials. So I could touch this painting and it would feel bumpy. Again, this piece of pottery would feel bumpy because of the surface technique that's created. The other type of texture is called implied texture. And this is when an image is made to look like it has texture. So this is mostly done in a two-dimensional way, drawing or painting. These two drawings of animals, a kitty and a doggy, if you touch them, they would be smooth, flat, because they are a painting or a drawing. But they are created to look like they have texture, like they should be furry and fluffy and soft. Van Gogh did lots of paintings that use implied texture. So this is a painting, but his beard looks like it's rough. His skin looks a little rough. His hat looks like it has texture, but it's really just a flat painting. This piece of artwork, again, implied texture that it's a soft, fluffy lion, but it's just a piece of flat paper. So now we're moving on to the principles of art. This is how we use those elements we just talked about. And we use them in the following ways: balance, contrast, emphasis, movement or rhythm, pattern, and unity. Balance is how the artist divides the parts of an image. There are two types of balance that you need to know for our purposes. Symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance means they are relatively the same on both sides. So I draw a line right in the middle of this painting, and they're not identical, so it's not a mirror image, but they feel visually the same on both sides. Our cake in the middle is cut in half, and then we have relatively the same amount of visual weight on the left as we do on the right. We draw a line down the middle. This one's almost a mirror image, but not quite, but it feels visually the same on the left and the right. Same thing with this painting. And this one, right down the middle, this one's almost a mirror image as well, but it feels the same on the left and the right. This painting we saw earlier is symmetrically balanced, even though it's not an exact copy on both sides, but it feels the same on the left and the right. The other type of balance that you need to know for our purposes are asymmetrical balance. This is when one side is heavier than the other. So this painting by Degas of the ballerinas is heavier on the right than it is on the left. On the right, you have two dancers that are large in size, they are detailed, and they're in the front. On the left, the dancers are in the background, they're less detailed, and they're fuzzy. The painting feels visually heavier on the right than it does on the left. This painting, if you draw a line down the middle, the barn, all the visual interest is on the right rather than the left. Another painting by Degas, the ballerina is on the right side, seems to be a trend, and she's bright in color, she's big, our interest is on the right side and not so much on the left. So this would be an asymmetrical balanced painting. The next principle is contrast. So it's the use of any of those elements that you learned about, opposites of them. So we have light colors versus dark colors, or rough versus smooth textures, or large shapes versus small shapes. So the contrast of any of those elements. In this print, you can see that we have a bright color versus a dark color. You can have contrasting color temperatures. So cool colors, where the house is cool colors of blues and purples, versus warm colors of the land, of reds and oranges and yellows. You can have contrasting lines, so curvy lines versus straight lines. The next principle is emphasis. How an artist draws your eyes to the focal point, or where your eye goes first. In this painting, the artist does a couple of things to make you look at the focal point. The focal point being the man in the white shirt. The man in the white shirt is brightest in value. He has a very light white shirt on. The lines of the guns are pointed towards the man. This makes your eyes follow those lines to the guy in the center. He's also in the center, so usually that's where you want the focal point to be when you look at something right away. He's also large in size. The line of the land goes to the man. There's a light shining on him. So there's a couple things happening that the artist does intentionally to make you look at the man in the middle, because that is where he wants your interest to go. The focal point of this painting would be the girl in the field. She's large in size. She's a bright color pink. She's more detailed. She's a person. In this painting, again, we have a girl on the swing, and she's bright in color versus the dark background. We have the lines of the swing that lead your eye down to her. Her value is much brighter than anything else in the painting. This one has an apple on his face. It's bright green color versus kind of the subdued colors of the man in the background. It's placed in the center, and it's an apple, so it's kind of an odd thing that the artist intentionally wants you to look there first before exploring the rest of the painting. The next principle is patterned, when an element or object repeats. So in this print, we have a pattern of bananas. In this Klimt painting, there's patterns of swirls and triangles and circles or ovals. It's not an exact pattern like a polka dot or a stripe, but it's when something repeats itself that we could say we have pattern of swirls throughout this painting. The next one is movement or rhythm. This is a twofold principle because it's how our eye moves around an image, but how also something appears to be like it's moving even though it's on a flat two-dimensional space. So if we look at the scream here, we first look at the face itself, and that's the focal point of the painting. But then our eyes kind of follow back this trail on the boardwalk, and we see that there's two guys. Well, that's interesting. And then our eyes kind of get caught in this river that flows back, and then kind of back and forth up into the sky because we have these beautiful horizontal brush strokes. So it doesn't look like the scream is moving, but our eyes move throughout this painting intentionally, and the artist does this usually intentional. This is the other side. So the horse is not moving. Our eyes don't really move throughout the painting, but the horse looks like it's moving because of the brush strokes, because of the way that it's positioned. This painting has a rhythm of women and a rhythm of colors that kind of lead your eye from left to right and up and down these beautiful flowing lines of color. So that your eye moves throughout the painting and really looks at everything as it gets trapped within a color. In this painting, your eye always wants to follow a line, so you kind of get trapped looking at this line and following it and discovering these other beautiful colors and shapes that are created. And again, this one appears to have movement. It appears that the cowboy is wrangling that cow and he's moving, even though it's just a series of brush strokes in the way that it's positioned. And the last principle we're going to talk about is unity. How everything works together in a painting to make it feel unified or complete. In the Starry Night, which is a very popular painting, you can see that it has similar colors and tones and color temperatures. It has similar brush strokes, and it's mostly made up of organic shapes and lines. This painting has kind of neutral tones, organic shapes. It all works together to look like it's a complete, unified piece of art. Again, we have beautiful golds and yellows. We have patterns. Most artwork that I will show you is unified. It has unity.